as an introduction. So we're going back to Osek mitzvah, pater mitzvah, and just be aware that this is the kind of svar. Not every svar is like this. Sometimes you can have like an isolated svar, but in this sugya, a lot of the ideas giving over are going to be ideas that one's built off the other. So if you don't get step A, then you're not going to understand when we get up to step D or E.
You better not ask about D or E.
Right. So you need to understand every step. And just to review this idea, okay? You would think that built into the very idea of a mitzvah is the notion that I must stop whatever I'm doing and do the mitzvah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
In other words, that's actually built into the halachic construct of the mitzvah. So if that's the case, it will be irrelevant what activity I'm doing, right? If I'm involved in the mitzvah right now, right, and another mitzvah comes along, the mechayev of the other mitzvah, right, once it enters into my framework, is to drop everything I'm doing and do the mitzvah. That's built into the very structure of mitzvah itself. Drop what you're doing and do the other mitzvah.
That's what we're up to?
What?
That's what we're up to.
Yeah, that's what we're up to.
Okay.
Okay? So the Gemara's conclusion is that no. The Gemara says no. B'shiftecha. Alright? So what's that modification? So how does the Gemara reject this? It says b'shiftecha. Right. Meaning you activities. So what's you activities?
Personal.
Well, you gotta be a little more sophisticated than that. Because that's a little bit different than saying derech.
Optional activities.
Meaning what?
Meaning that if I'm not doing a mitzvah, I'm doing something else.
Well, we can't say anymore that's built into the structure of mitzvah. That can't be.
Why not?
Because if it's built into the structure of mitzvah, then every time I'm involved in a mitzvah and another mitzvah comes along, what do I have to do?
You have to stop that mitzvah.
Right, and we know that's not the case. We know at the end of the day. So how does b'shiftecha answer that? B'shiftecha.
Right.
How does that answer that?
Right.
Right. In other words, again, the idea is that you can't say that built into the construct of a mitzvah is the idea that I must stop what I'm doing and do the mitzvah. Right. If that's not the case, the Gemara's move is b'shiftecha. So it's adding a little wrinkle to this. It's saying that in Yaakov or in you activities, what does it mean? You activity means that what do mitzvahs do? Mitzvahs come up. They impose on your activity. They impose on you.
Yeah.
Right. But if you're already involved in a mitzvah, another mitzvah can't impose on you. Thus, asuk mitzvah, pater mitzvah.
So all mitzvahs are equal. And that
Gemara now has established Maisa, but now it's got a big problem. What's the problem? No. So ihachi afilu kones es almana nami. Okay. Kones es Okay. So the transition taking place here. What the Gemara is telling you is that okay, great. So now you've established asuk, and we know it definitely applies to Maisa, but we also know what, and it applies to who else? A chassan. Okay. So let's put chassan over here. Now, what do we know by chassan? We know that there's what makes a chassan pater from Kriya Shema?
Machshava.
Okay, so right, machshava, which means tarid. Okay, but we know there's a distinction now. What's a distinction?
Between tarid and
between almana and besula. Right. Okay, so for some reason, besula, yes, almana.
You just circle it. No.
Right. So
okay. No,
right.
No,
I could have done it too. Right. You're right. So we know that tarid works by besula, not by amana. Yes. But one second. But before we get to that, before we can understand that distinction, we have to make one little svara move, which is that why do we assume, or how do we know that asuk should apply to this? Yeah.
Because Rashi says something that I don't want to repeat.
Question like this. The question you have to answer is, Rashi clearly gives us a havmina. Rashi's saying that what would you think asuk means? It means maisa. He says it means mahalech, the mitzvah, or meleches mitzvah b'yadayim, basis of al chasen shu yoshev batal, ve'ino osek. Eino osek. Ella, tarid machshavas be'ila. Lo pater kasev. Kamashwan, he's pater. So what's Rashi saying? Rashi's saying, what would you think? You would think that
Osek's only maisa. Right,
he's not asuk. If I'm doing this, how's that asuk? How is sitting, staring off into space, fantasizing about bia? How is that asuk? He's saying it's not asuk. He's saying it's tarid.
For mitzvahs
No, it's not. So the question is, what must you say about asuk? You have to redefine what asuk means. When we say asuk a mitzvah, okay, that's obviously the first step. It can't just be maisa, right? It's a simple brisker chakira. I mean, the answer is that. What's Torah teaching you? Torah's teaching you the following. Torah's telling you that really asuk mitzvah is a halacha in the gavra. Okay? It's a halacha in the gavra. Alright? Now, there's two ways that's expressed. Okay? There's the category is gavra. There's two ways that can be expressed. One way is Maisa, and the other way is Machshava. It's a very simple point. Okay? But you'll see. You have to say this. It's a critical. You'll see. You think right now it's easy, but
you can't rely on your intuition to the degree I am right now.
Right, you
have to. We have to conceptually break it down.
You need to make this step, because if you just say it's halacha and ma'isa per se, you'll never understand why the chassan and almana are issues. But if you understand that really all along asuk refers to an involvement of the gavra. Now there's two ways a gavra can be involved. One way is through ma'isa, right? The other way is through tarid. But what tarid does is tarid means that I'm now a different gavra. Tarid means I'm a different gavra. It changes who I am. I'm defined now as a chassan. Was another example, by the way.
You just that I'm not saying intuitive dive.
If you're telling me that tarud, right, creates the patur, right, so that should apply by the almana as well. Because what does the chassan do? He's thinking about having bia with the almana, just like he's thinking about having bia with the basula. He is. Okay. So the Gemara says no. The Gemara says that basula is tarud and almana is not tarud. What kind of answer is that? Why is that a good answer? Okay, so what you already see now. This is what you were saying. I just wanted you to wait a second. What do you see? You see that tirda itself is not enough to define the gavra as asuk. It's not tirda per se, because if it were tirda per se, it wouldn't matter if it was almana or basula. It would be this, right? It would be the same thing.
As long as there's a mitzvah of having.
But 100%. But the fact that the Gemara says no, that one is tarot and one we have to define it though. But since one is tarot and one's not, so what's it telling you? It's telling you.
We need that more.
Yes, it's telling you that. What's it telling you? It's telling you that ultimately that it's not simply tirda per se.
Halacha tirda.
We haven't got that yet, but it's not tirda per se that defines you as asuk. It's not tirda per se. Okay, and even associated with the mitzvah, it's not tirda per se. How do we know it to be the case? Now comes the next thing. Go. To understand this, you have to go step by step. First, let's take out the difference between the almana and the basula, and you'll see how the sfina case naturally emerges from that. So why?
Better prep.
The Gemara clearly says that basula is tarid, and almana is not.
Right. Sorry.
So why not? Now I don't care about psychological.
What was the scar we gave for tarid?
Let's take a step back. So we want to say it was like this. It's a very simple hakira, but it's necessary to make this step I want to make now. What you have to say is that it's not that the maisa, asuk means it's a maisa. Asuk means it's a certain din in the gavra. Now there's two ways you could be asuk. You could be defined as being asuk. One is maisa, that reflects back on the gavra, or tarid, which means I'm a different type of gavra. Okay? I'm a chassan. I'm thinking, my thoughts.
What's the first one?
First one is simple maisa. You're sticking with that. It's just putting underneath the category of gavra.
How did Maisa get on the gavra now?
By the Rashi says by the basula libo tarer machshavas beila. So what is he thinking about? He's thinking about having bia with his wife for the first time, right? Ve'eno yachol lasok b'shnayim ke'echad. And since he's involved in thinking about having bia with the basula, he can't do what? Shnayim ke'echad. Meaning what? He can't be involved in both thinking about
and saying Shema.
Okay?
Right, so
whoa! But by the almana, kones almana lo tarid. So Rashi says, what does lo tarid mean? But he's thinking about it. Lo tarid means the yachol l'kayim eshtayan. So now Rashi already gave us a hint.
Quantitative difference?
Rashi's giving us a hint. Rashi's saying that what's going to differentiate between tarid? What's the difference between tarid and not tarid? It's a question of can I do both and not do both? All right. So give me an explanation for that. That's the first. That's one side. The Havin is going to say is that tarid per se produces the Torah for mitzvah. Meaning, as long as I'm preoccupied in some sort of thinking about a mitzvah, don't worry so much about attached to mitzvah. But it's being involved in thinking per se, right? That does what? That produces the Torah from another mitzvah.
Of a mitzvah.
Fine, but it's not. It's going to be yes for now. But I'm not so concerned about that because of the Sfina case. So for now, what are you going to say? You're going to say it's involvement. In other words, if I'm involved in something thinking-wise, right? Tarid means what's tarid? Let me ask a question. Why does the Gemara make this step? It's a beautiful.
That is a nice.
Why is this? What's the transition here? It's a beautiful transition. It's a beautiful transition.
Very clear.
Because one second. Because what have we proved up to this point? And this is why I'm trying to again step by step. Okay. Be quiet for a second. Just be quiet for a second. Shh. Gavra. Okay. Two ways he could be asuk. One is maisa and one is tarid. Now let me ask you a question. Is maisa? When I ask you maisa, okay, what do we know about maisa? Is maisa subject to shear?
No.
Does it matter how? No. Is there an how much? If I'm picking up a lulav, does it matter how hard I'm squeezing the lulav?
No.
How high I pick it up, assuming it's over tefach? Does any of that matter? No. It's just be quiet. It's the fact that I'm doing a maisa. So maisa is not subject to shear. If maisa is not subject to shear, what would you think by tarid?
It's also
Torah's not either.
It's also not subject to shear as well. So say that
it's quantitative.
what?
Are you just saying it's quantitative?
No, it can't just be quantitative.
Good.
It can't just be quantitative. So what's the answer? So the Gemara is saying that can't be the case because we see it's different between Basul and Amana. So what's the answer?
So you're talking
So if we say that the idea of that Asuk is a din in the Gavra, and there's two ways that's expressed through Maisa and Tarid, now it's very beautiful. What you would think, therefore, is Maisa is really not subject to degrees. We don't evaluate someone's hisaskus in a Maisa based on degrees. We just say, if he's doing the Maisa, he's doing the Maisa. So the same thing should apply by Tarid. And therefore it applies by Tarid. Bisula and Almana.
They can't be split.
Right, it can't be split. I can't even write it. I'm just going to write a Bays and Aleph. Bays equals Aleph, right? That's the Gemara's question. It should be exactly the same. I'm Tarid. Just like his askus in a Maisa, I'm Pater, his askus in Tarid should also produce a Ptur. Right? So what makes it different? And that's the Chiddush. That's the Tarid becomes different.
We don't have the Chiddush yet.
I'm saying quantity. The Gemara is saying this. The Gemara is saying that you would think that Tarid, the same qualifications or the same system that applies by Maisa should apply by Tarid. So therefore, it wouldn't matter if it's a Basul or a Mana, as long as I am Tarid. Just like Maisa, his askus pater b'mitzvah, Tarid his askus pater b'mitzvah, right? Which would mean that what creates the patur? Involvement per se creates the patur. Right. His askus creates the patur. Okay. Therefore, Maisa and Tarid would be the same. Right. How does Tarid divert? What's Rashi telling you?
Is that
Rashi telling you that? No, Rashi's telling you that by Tarid, you're right.
Thank you.
You need a modification in Tarid. But what does that mean, though? You got to go further than that. What's the modification? What's the Gemara is saying to this? The Gemara is saying is that you can't say it's involvement per se that produces a patur in a mitzvah. It can't be involvement. So what must it be? What must it be? It's not involvement. What's Rashi telling you? Rashi's telling you there's a shear by Bisula. Bisula is a shear. What's the shear? What's the shear? What's the shear? What? What?
You can't do something else.
You can't do something else, right? Just listen. How does Rashi know that? We'll get to that in a second. But so what Rashi's telling you is that what's the shear for the chasan for the Basula is Eino Yachol L'Kayim Shneim. He can't do both. Now, think about it. If you think about it, forget the psychology of the fact why he can't do both in the case of Basula. It's irrelevant. What's he trying to show you? Because if I'm saying Eino Mekayim Shneim is really the barometer, what else does that apply to then? Maisa. Whereas now you still have one universal idea. That's what the Gemara is trying to do. The Gemara is not trying. The trap here is to think that it's to start getting involved in the psychology. That's irrelevant. What the Gemara is doing is beautiful. The Gemara is saying is that what would you think? What would you think first? You would think first. Let me just finish saying it. You would think first that what determines hisaskus? Involvement. Oh, but 1 second. Involvement has no shear. So therefore, it would have to be equal by Maisa as by Tarid. Now the Gemara says, no, that can't be, because we know Basul is different than Almana. So what must therefore be? It must be that there's a shear of Tarid. What's the shear of Tarid? Eino Mekayim Shneim. And that applies as well to Maisa. But there is no shear by Maisa. Why? Because if I'm picking up a lulav, what can't I do?
By definition, when you're Maisa, you are in Mekayim Shneim.
Exactly. If I'm picking up a lulav, can I do something else? No. So now we have kept these unified, and we have one beautiful idea. Clear. I didn't say mitzvah. I said the nature. Be quiet. The nature of his Tarid is one that prevents him from doing both. Okay? But the whole point, though, is that don't worry about its attachment to mitzvah. It's a question of, can I do A and B? I can't do both A and B. It's impossible. So 1 second. So why is the Sfina case a perfect question? The Sfina case is what? The Sfina case is the guy's Tarid. Right? If I'm thinking about all my belongings going down to the ocean, how can I do a mitzvah? How can I do something else? Right? But 1 second. But what about the case by the Avel? The Gemara says, no, we see by the Avel. What do we see by the Avel? The Avel is chayv mitzvahs, right? So why is the kasha by an Avel such a good kasha? Because I said before, I said that what does Tirda do? Tirda does what? I said it changes your gavra. But 1 second, an Avel should be equivalent to a chasan, right? An Avel should be equivalent to a chasan because an Avel is Tarid. So why can you say by the Avel? He's also Tarid. He's consumed by the.
He's already changed.
What he said is that it's clear that there's no question that Rashi is coming along and telling you there's a certain shear that exists by the Basula, right? Eino Mekayim Shneim. But what's that shear based on? Now the shear must be based on one thing.
To level mitzvahs now.
No.
Okay.
What should that shear be based on?
Understanding.
Right, but what's it based on though? What's the root of that shear?
Well, there are two categories. I don't know which one root is.
What's the
one
root?
is the Gabra status, and one is the mind's capacity.
Okay, so let's discuss the mind's capacity. Okay, if the reason why I can't do both is because what? Because I'm just consumed.
Can't do both.
Right, but it has to be.
Psychology.
Because, right. All right. Well,
I'm down. Let's do
psychology. Okay. I am emotionally invested in the Basula. Okay. So one second. But that same idea should apply to the Avel. So what's the answer?
Don't think
What's the
Torah
answer?
is any sort of...
What? No. What's Rashi's answer? Rashi says, "Tirda de rishus." He has to act like an avel, but he's not chayav to be sad. So what's Rashi telling you? This is the final step, the easiest step of them all. What's Rashi telling you? We thought up to this point. What? We thought up to this point that what makes him a certain type of gavra, that to be Torah, to hit that shear of Einam Makayim Shneim, a certain incapability of him to be able to do both. Okay? But why should that should apply by the Avel as well? So Rashi's answer is no, he's Eino Chayav. So Yaakov, what were you saying? The Avel is Eino Chayav, so what's that telling you? It's telling you that what? It's not that emotional tirda is an important thing. There's only one thing it's lacking.
It's not necessarily halachic.
Why not? Because it's not attached to a mitzvah. Okay, and if it's not attached to, so what does mitzvah do? Mitzvah is, and this is the last line, mitzvah is the halachic mechanism for the Patur to emerge. Right. No.
The Patur to emerge from...
Patur to emerge. Not for Asuk to emerge, but to be Asuk in order to be Patur. The Asuk mitzvah, Patur mitzvah. How does it become Patur? For the Patur to emerge, it has to be that his askas is attached to what? A mitzvah. If it's not attached to mitzvah, even though you can't say the Avel isn't, you can't say the Avel is not as, you can't say the Avel is not as misasek as the Chassan. The Avel is just as misasek. The Avel is just as misasek as the Chassan is in Tirda. You can't say they're not, but there's one difference. The difference is that the Avel's, his askas, is not attached to mitzvah. So if it's not attached to mitzvah, there's no halachic mechanism for the patur of the other mitzvah to emerge. That's the end point in the Gemara.